go. Day fucking 19, baby. Day 19. Oh, this puppy's a little stuck. So I'm going to take you guys through my new reformed workout cocktail. So the reason I'm changing it up is because I've been doing the pre-workout, I've been hitting the stimulants, and I would say overall it is beneficial for the most part to take a pre-workout if that works for you. But the downside is that I can't really train later in the day because I don't want to take 200 milligrams of caffeine at 6 p.m. I'm not going to be able to sleep. So, and I have the most energy typically for training later in the day, like 3, 4, 5, 6 p.m. is when I get my best sessions in. So that's reason number one that I'm taking out the stimulants. So we're just going to do carb powder and Gatorade powder. So some simple sugars and electrolytes, I think. I don't know. Gatorade's got electrolytes, right? It must. So we're just going to do a little bit of carb and a little bit of Gatorade powder. And the second reason that I'm swatching it up is because I'm changing my split as well, which I'm going to talk more about. And I'm suspicious that when I do pre-workout, take the stimulants, that it ends up making it hard for me to sleep or like calm back down. The reason I think that is because sometimes after a beastly session, I'm like exhausted. I'm absolutely wiped, and I need to just lay down and chill. And normally, I feel like I should like maybe nap, but I can never fall asleep. There's something like in my system, my brain is still like, I'm laying there, my body's just completely fucking comatose. I'll lay there for like half an hour, 45 minutes, maybe an hour. But I can't actually fall asleep, which is strange. And so I think there's something a bit weird there with taking the stimulants consistently. And so I think it's kind of affecting my recovery a little bit. I'm speculating. So those are the reasons that I'm switching it up to this, just something to sip on, some carbohydrates and some sugars during the workout. Today's going to be legs. So I'm going to get on the foam roller here and we're going to chat a little bit more about the changes in my split and all. All right, so I'm going to hop on the roller here because this is an easy part of my warm-up routine to do while we're chit-chatting, or chitty-chatting a little bit, having a little chitty-chatterson. It's almost noon. It's a little bit earlier today. I know I just said my best training times are for later in the day, but today is such that I have to train earlier, so that's what's going to happen. Let's get on this roller here. Oof. So my new split, I was doing, and what I've done, it's probably been for probably about the last year, maybe about 10 months, because this time last year I was doing arm day every day. That was a good little experiment. But what I've been doing is arms, legs, arms, day off, repeat. So I'm hitting arms every second day, and then I'm hitting legs, resting 3 days, then hitting the legs again. Now, the reason for that is that because my arm training is much further advanced than my leg training. I've only been consistently hitting the legs for 1 year now, coming up on 1 year. And something that I've found in your training, if you want to continue to see progress, you have to find ways to make it more difficult progressively. And one of the ways to do that is to increase your frequency, to train more often. And so when you first start, if you hit any muscle group once a week, and you train decently hard, you do, maybe 10 sets per muscle in each workout, something roughly like this, and you train like with some intensity, you don't necessarily have to go all the way to failure, you will see progress 100% if you're consistent with it. But then after like 6 months to a year, something like that, the newbie gains phase ends and it becomes really tough to continue to see progress if you don't change something. And just hoping to progress the weight, I find, is not adequate enough to ensure that you continue to see progress, given that you're staying natural. You're doing the natty fight. You're fighting on the natty train. Sometimes you fucking say shit. I say shit. I'm like, why did I just say that? That sounds so stupid. A lot of dumb shit comes out of my mouth. A lot of dumb shit goes into the mouth too. Perfect example. A lot of dumb shit going in and out. Um, but yeah, so progressively over time, I slowly started increasing my frequency with the arms. So at first, I would rest 3 days, maybe even 4 days. You got to rest to full recovery. Shouldn't be any soreness. There's no harm in taking an extra rest day. I think in the beginning, this is a good way to look at it. But then you need to ramp things up. So I started resting just 3 days, and then I started, okay, let me try just two. Oh, it seems to be working better. And I seem to be recovering. Let me just try resting one day, hitting arms every other day. That seems to be even better. Okay, let me try hitting them every day. And so I did that for a little while, where I was hitting arms every day for about a month. It was a good experiment. I would say it's a little bit extreme, and that every other day is kind of the sweet spot for myself at this point in my training. And so the takeaway that you should get is that any of these parameters in your workout program, whether it be your frequency, which we're talking about here, how often you hit a muscle, it could be your volume, how many sets you do, it could be your rest times, it could be the weight, a whole bunch of these other variables. I won't go into all of them. I don't want to make it too confusing, but you need to find ways to make it more difficult, to make it so the stimulus, the demand, the stress on your body is more difficult. And this idea that you go into the gym and you know, train hard enough where you tear the muscles down and you got to rest to full recovery, and then you just do that over and over again. I think a better mentality is like, how do I put a greater and greater stress on my body and just deviate or divorce yourself a little bit from this. I go in, I break the muscle fibers down, and then I recover. And I go, I'm not saying that's not how it works, but as you progress further, staying locked into that, I think makes it tough, because then you're like, well, I can't train more often because I got to rest for the recovery, you know. And I found to increase that frequency and hit the muscles more often to be more effective, as long as you do it progressively. And so that's where it comes into the discussion of overtraining. A lot of people would say, well, that's overtraining. But I think the key thing to understand is that overtraining, it depends on who you are and where you're at in your training. And so like what could be overtraining for somebody just starting out, if you were to do my exact arm routine, exactly what I'm doing, and you've never worked out before, yeah, maybe you'll be overtraining. Maybe you'll hurt yourself. Maybe your body won't recover. But as you train for many, many years, you have to progressively find ways to make your training more difficult if you want to continue to grow. And so that leads me to my point about why I've changed my split, because I'm close to my goal with the arms, the 17.75 inches. I want the 18s. And I'm like, what is next? What do I got to do next? What change do I have to make next? Because something I've found is that, yes, being consistent is absolutely crucial, but especially as I've gotten more advanced, it's like small adjustments lead to growth like pretty quickly. So for example, frequency. When I went from always resting 3 days, and then I started increasing the frequency, reducing the rest times, I think within a month I gained like an extra quarter inch or half inch, because it's all of a sudden the stimulus, the stress, the demand on your muscles has been ramped up drastically, and your body has to respond by building more muscle. And so the way that I'm looking at it now is that I have to do something concretely more difficult. I added in that faster tempo about maybe 2 months ago now, and that's allowed me to progress the weight and load the muscle with more weight in a more explosive tempo. For whatever reason, added an extra quarter inch of muscle, which happened like quickly, I swear, within like a couple weeks. And then I've just kind of stayed at that range again. And, you know, maybe 3 months down the line, if I just keep progressing the weight some and this and that, I'll add a little bit more size. Yes, maybe. But I have seen making these drastic, concrete changes to your training to lead to the most significant results. So reflecting on my training again, I'm like, okay, well, what's next? What's the next level? What do I got to do? How do I increase the stress, the demand on my body? And so I'm changing my split to arms, legs, repeat. So the frequency for the arms is way up, and the frequency for the legs is going to be up too. So I'm just going to be resting 2 days in between leg sessions. I don't necessarily need to do, because I'm still seeing progress in the legs, resting 3 days in between each session. But if I am going to up the frequency for the arms, the only way to really make it work is to then also up the frequency for the legs. Unless I'm going to hit arms and legs on the same day, one of the workouts, which I don't want to do. So, all of that being said, I'm hoping that this will be the increase in intensity, the increase in stress that will lead to the increase in muscle that I'm looking for. And if you're thinking, well, that sounds extreme, you're going to train arms 2 days in a row. I just did it the past 2 days. There's no way. Are you going to hurt your elbow? You're going to injure you. I'm telling you, man, like if you progressively work up to things, some things that sound like overkill, your body can actually handle. And the flip side of that is to be smart and to listen to your joints and to your muscles. And if something is like, yeah, you can do too much and injure yourself 100%. But if you do it slowly, progressively, and you do it smart, you do all the warm-ups, you listen to your body, you do warm-up sets, I think increasing the stimulus and making things more and more difficult could have you end up in a position where it's like on the surface to somebody who's like not familiar with your whole journey or with like what you've been through or what all the things you've done leading up to that. They may go, that's too extreme, that's not going to work, that's insane. And you can just stay trapped in that mentality if you want and make no fucking gains, which I did for years. And then once you sort of bust out of that and go, let me just try this, let me just try that, let me just try that, let's see what happens. Maybe it's possible. Maybe I could just do this and maybe it would be better. Once you sort of give yourself that freedom within reason, I've probably learned way more from just fucking experimenting with different shit than trying to just follow what fucking Jeff Nippard has scientifically reviewed to be accurate. I love Jeff. He's got good stuff. I think it's really effective to a point, but then I think you're better off as you get more advanced and more experience to just start experimenting and just start throwing shit at the wall and see what sticks. If I stayed in that mentality, my arms would still be 16.5 inches, and that would be my genetic potential. So a lot of people who are saying like, I've hit my genetic potential. I think it's you've hit a plateau, but based on your current mentality. And that barrier you've put on your training is because you're mentally married to this one ideology or view of working out and you won't let go of it, and therefore there's no other way to train that could be better. That option can't enter your mind even, and therefore I'm at my genetic limit. But again, maybe you could just break the rules, start training more often, start doing more sets than is optimal. And all of these different parameters I've kind of taken to the extreme and applied to myself to see what happens. So for example, this volume, I've done 100 set workouts, all the way from 3 sets up to 100 over many years to see what's optimal, or not what's optimal, but what's worked best for me, right? Same thing with rest times, rest 10 seconds all the way up to 7 minutes in between a set. Same thing with frequency, which is what we're talking about more here. And a little plug here, I feel like I've condensed a lot of the lessons I've learned from this into my ARM course, which is linked in the description. And I'm going to talk about all this same kind of shit and details in these videos openly, but that course condenses it all down into a more like succinct, tight manner of this is specifically all the things I've learned. This is specifically how I think you should go about training your arms if your goal is to grow them. So you check that out if you're interested in growing the pipes. But yeah, that's where we're at with the new training split and how I'm thinking about it. Because at this point, like, I'm definitely bumping or coming close to what my genetic potential is naturally for my arm growth. And like I'm having to do more and more extreme things. Like I don't know what else really. Same thing with intensity. For a while I explored like going beyond failure where you do the set to failure, let's say of tricep extensions, and then you do some partials at the end because you still got a little bit of those left, and then you have a spotter assist you to get the weight up, and then you just do a negative. So you're going to failure of a full range of motion and then upping the intensity by doing some partials and some assisted negatives. Fuck, man. And the lesson, usually I'll find like there's kind of a sweet spot of like, okay, because anytime you up one variable, whether it be your frequency or your volume or your intensity, you kind of sacrifice the other ones, right? So if you want to train with maximum intensity every set where you go beyond failure, then you're going to have to rest like 10 minutes potentially to get full recovery. And then it's going to be harder to do as much volume if you're focused on moving as much weight or trying to move more weight. So all these things kind of each one affects each other and they're all kind of linked, so they move in tandem. So if you really want to max out one factor, like even arm day every day, well then you might have to drop back your intensity, you might have to drop back your volume, right? So that's just how you should think about it. And I've talked about this before. It's like the exercise selection that you do doesn't really fucking matter that much. Yes, mixing it up, having a few different kind of movements or ways to target each muscle can be useful, but it's vastly overstated. And in particular with the arms, they're not that complicated. Your biceps and your triceps, you're flexing and extending your elbow. This whole hit the fucking short head, hit the long head, twist, it's such fucking horseshit. Okay? And I followed that for a long time because a lot of people will preach that shit. And I was obsessed with hitting this angle and that angle and this and that and that. I'm telling you, it doesn't make a fucking difference. It's like the smallest minuscule thing. The things that matter are the other aspects I'm talking about in your training. How often do you hit it? How hard do you train? How much volume do you do? How long do you rest? Pick a couple movements you like that work and focus on progressing those other variables with those movements. And then if you want to have some more variety, you can switch up the exercises and try this one and try that one. But the exercises do not matter that much, okay? Especially for your arms. You're curling and you're extending the elbow. And then you can move the position around a little bit. It makes a small difference, but it doesn't matter that much. And the reason I get a little bit feisty with this is because I just see over and over and over again, particularly with content online, people being like, hey, how do you hit like a good freaking arm workout? All right, well, you got to do this for your short head and that for your long head. And they don't even talk about the rep range. They don't even talk about the intensity, the weight, the amount of sets, how often they hit. I'm like, you're not setting people up for success, man. This is fucking stupid. But it like makes good content and it's like visually appealing to like talk about the muscles that way. And it's a way to, associate all the value with the fucking exercise. I think it makes good content and it for the beginner, it like is what people want to hear. People aren't like, well, talk to me about like rep scheme and like rest times. Like that's just not what the beginner wants to hear or think about. It's like, how do you get a big chest? What's the exercise? What's the secret movement that the fucking Rock does to get huge tits? That's not it. So that's probably enough of a ramble. About that. Fucking shit, I'm really massaging this thing out. So let's talk a little bit about my back and my right freaking hip flexor has been super flared up lately, which isn't necessarily anything new, but it's been worse. And I think it's because I'm swinging a lot with my curls and I'm kind of like my lower back in general has been really tight. And so if you have a tight psoas muscle on this side, for me, it's on the right side, that's going to pull your hips up some or tend to. It can lead to a tilting of your hips in this direction. Which then can have a cascading effect up your body and cause muscle imbalances through your back, all the way up into your shoulders, down into your legs. So it can be a serious thing, in particular the psoas. And so a couple of things I've found to be effective for releasing it. One is stretch, which we talked about before, but where you go into this position here and you want to establish a neutral spine. So you don't want to be like excessively arching through your lower back. You don't want to be sagging like this necessarily. You want to kind of tilt the hips this way, bring them back and under. Think about tucking your butt under. You're kind of thrusting. That's going to bring a neutral curve or a neutral position for your lower back, right? So that's the first step. And if you really want to get to that psoas, raising your hands up overhead and then leaning away, I find really targets that muscle. So I know we're a little cropped here, but I raise my hands up and then I'm going to lean this way a little bit, okay? That's going to get in there really good. Something else, which is probably going to seem a little bit counterintuitive, but anything that kind of gets you into a more posteriorly tilted position. So for example, child's pose, where your knees are like this, and then you reach out in front of you and stretch. It's just a very mild stretch of the lower back, but it encourages some posterior tilting, meaning pelvis. I've talked about this in a lot of my short form content. Anterior tilt is where if this is a flat line, now it's going to tilt this way. So your butt's sticking out, right? And your pelvis is tilting forward. Posterior is the opposite of that. It's the correction of that. And so any movement like this that really stretches things posteriorly will stretch out the lower back. And the reason that I think that can help to release the psoas is because it originates on your spine, in your lower back. So that's another movement I found to be really useful. And then also the similar one, but where you go on your back like this and you pull your knees and you hug them into your chest. I find that can help too. And I know this is the opposite. You're actually bringing your hip into flexion, but again, this is largely anecdotal, this part, where I've just found if that right psoas is super flared up, some direct hip flexor stretching like the first one, and then also some stuff that's encouraging the pelvis to tilt posteriorly and release some tension on the lower back, I find to work. And the last thing is some form of massage. And so it kind of will look like you're jerking yourself off. So I do this one in the gym or in my warm up on upper and lower days to release because my right psoas is always tight. I don't know if you can see. Yeah, but I'm digging in kind of right here. So if you find like the front of your, or like the top of your pelvis, right, you can feel that if you dig kind of in your side. And then you come to the front and there's sort of a point where it ends. That's your ASIS, I think. ASIS, anterior superior iliac spine, I think. I could be wrong, but I think that's the technical and anatomical definition of this point that I'm putting in my pelvis right here. Okay, so if you find that spot, and then you move inward towards your belly button just slightly, in there is where you have the psoas muscle and the iliacus muscle as well, which originates from your pelvis there, I believe, and then kind of does this similar. So often the psoas is called the iliopsoas because you have the iliacus, or I don't remember. I think it's called the iliacus, and the psoas. They kind of conjoin together, but the difference is the psoas originates from your lower back, where the iliacus, let's just call it that, originates from your pelvis in that region. Anyways, if you get in there, and what I'll do is I'll get a thumb or a finger, and I'll just dig for 50. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you can see why you don't want to make eye contact with anybody, or don't, I mean, if they look closely, they can see you're just kind of digging into your pelvis, but if you're moving your hands back and forth like this, and they're kind of in this, it looks a little suspect. So, but I found that to really help to just kind of release some of the tension there. And lastly, if you have this thing called the So-Right, which I've only used once, and I want to get one, but it's this device. It's just a piece of plastic, really. It's nothing fancy. But imagine if this was it, but it has two edges like here and here that kind of stick out. And then you lay it flat on the ground. You put those right into that same spot. And then you just lay on it. And it fucking does wonders to release your psoas. That's on my list of massage fucking gadgets to acquire. Because I got, like I've mentioned, that right psoas really gets tight. And part of the reason, if, we haven't talked about this in other videos, but this right ankle is a little janky, which I talked about. And so when I bend my knees, what's the pattern that has been ingrained since I broke it when I was 16 is that I've lost that range of motion and stability. So that right knee kind of caves in. And what happens when that right knee caves in is that the right hip comes forward and elevates up. And that's what's leading to that psoas muscle getting really tight. So it's stemming from a dysfunction and lack of stability, lack of mobility, and lack of stability in my ankle joint, which is just another example of how connected the human body can be. And if you seriously injure a joint or a certain area of your body doesn't heal correctly, and it doesn't restore like normal movement patterns or close to, that it will likely have effects in other places in your body as your body finds ways to compensate. So that's why it's super important to deal with injuries, specifically in ankle injuries, because that's personal to me. Anybody that sprains an ankle, I'm just like, fuck, go to physio, fucking deal with it. Don't be an idiot, because it can fuck your shit up. All right, so that's enough about that. I think I covered everything I wanted to talk about with the split, with my hips, my back. We're gonna try this new split and see how my body holds up, and if I can handle it. Hopefully, it takes me to the promised land. And if it works, I'm telling you, I'm within a week or 2 weeks, if it is an effective strategy, I will gain muscle, hopefully a quarter inch in the arms, and the legs will continue to grow. Which my primary motivation with changing the split wasn't for the legs. And yeah, I guess what I'll end on, what I wanted to mention is that with my leg training, I've been doing the jumping lunges for about 1 year now. I started about this time last year. And at that time, the legs were, I think, just under 23 inches. And now they're just under 25. So I've added 2 inches in a year just doing this one movement. And the reason for that is it's the only thing I've found that I can do that doesn't, excuse me, I'm just going to puke in my mouth real quick, that doesn't exacerbate the muscle imbalances, some of which I just kind of touched on there. I've tried so many other things, it just didn't work. The split stance movement of a stationary lunge seemed to not cause too many issues. And then for whatever reason, jumping, I don't know why, I tried them without jumping and it made it worse. Started causing issues in my back, my groin. So I had the jumping in. I don't know. I'm just like rolling with it. Okay. I don't understand exactly why it's working. And I get that maybe it doesn't make sense. If you're like, you have an ankle injury, you have all these issues, you can't train properly. How the fuck are you doing jumping lunges? I don't really know. Okay. It's just like kind of a process of trial and error until I found a movement I could fucking do. My point being, this time last year, I started them body weight, no weights, 6 sets. Okay. Jumping lunges. I'd rest 3 to 4 days, hit them again. 1 year later, I say consistent. I don't think I missed, if I missed any days, I did get sick at one point, but I was consistent. I was training over and over and over again. You have that foundation of consistency, and I was pushing myself, and I slowly started progressing the weight, adding in dumbbells. Started with like the 10-pound dumbbells every month or whatever. As soon as I could get like 16, 17, 18 reps, I'd up the weight to the 20-pound dumbbells, to the 25s, to the 30s. And now, last session, I'm doing the 55-pound dumbbells for sets of 15 reps. 1 year later, 2 inches added to the legs, just one movement. So if you feel like you have injuries, you have issues, like I can't fucking train, I can't do this, look at that example. Like I'm very limited in what I can do, but I go in, I do the mobility, I do the stretching, I release the muscles that are causing me problems. I pay attention to my body. I do the foam rolling. I do whatever I have to do and make adjustments as you go and then never miss a fucking session and then slowly progress the weight and just keep fucking showing up over and over again. 1 year later, an additional 110 pounds on top of my body weight for the jumping lunges for the exact same movement. Okay, I'm not saying it's ideal. If you have more function, if your body moves, do different movements, 100%. But I do think it is a testament that the exercise doesn't matter that much. You can see progress when it comes to muscle growth. Performance is going to be different. But if your goal is specifically to add muscle mass to a certain area in your body, in this case legs, you can do it with a single movement or a handful of movements. It's not that complicated. The exercise selection doesn't matter that much, but you have to make your training more difficult in some way or another. And adding a more explosive tempo helped, progressing the weight has helped, and now progressing the frequency, how often I'm training has helped, is going to help. And so if you just keep showing up and keep adding in things in to make it more and more difficult, you don't just keep doing the same thing over and over. Don't make sure that your training isn't stagnant. You can see progress. And for years, I had like skinny legs. I was embarrassed to like wear shorts. I would always like wear pants going to the gym because my legs were underdeveloped. Yeah, kind of fired up about that because that is, I feel like it's again nothing crazily impressive the size that my legs are, but given my circumstances, I think that 1 year transition says something. And more than anything else, if you are somebody who has a fucking issue or a reason that you feel like you can't progress, your body's like you have an injury, you have this, you have that, whatever, it's something mentally. Just look at that example, man. I don't like just keep fucking showing up. And I go to the gym, people like chirp me. What are you doing again? You're jumping lunges? Like, oh, look at this. All you do is fucking arms or jumping lunges. Either you're doing this athletic jumping thing or you're doing arms. Let's keep fucking showing up, motherfucker. Now look at this shit, So like, and do the fucking, whatever you gotta do. Like I gotta spend an hour to an hour and a half stretching out, doing the mobility exercise, doing all this shit before I can go train. Every time I go do it and then I go train. And you can decide what your goal is. It may not even be fucking working out. You can say working out stupid. It's going to be this other thing. But I think it's an example. And I'm not no fucking saint. I have issues. I have things that I haven't done as well as this. But with training and specifically the discipline and the consistency and overcoming limitations to still find ways to progress, I think I'm doing fairly well. I'm proud of myself, and I want to share it as inspiration to anybody else. That you can fucking do 1 year from today. Where could you be if you started and you go, oh, I have this issue, I have that. Look at my fucking shit. My shit's all jacked up. I found a way to get in there and do it. And I just keep fucking showing up, keep fucking showing up, keep analyzing what you're doing and what could I do to make it better? What could I do to improve? How could I make, what's the next thing for arm? What do I got to do? I got to change my split. What's the next thing? I got to add more weight. What's the next thing? What am I doing wrong? Maybe my range of motion. Maybe this. Why am I having this issue? Okay, like just stay on it and keep fucking showing up. Whew. That's probably enough. Should try to get a couple shots of jumping lunges. I'm going to the university gym here, which isn't overly friendly to filming, but it is Sunday and school hasn't started yet, so I think I might be able to sneak a couple clips in. As you saw in that last workout, I now have membership at a Good Life Fitness, which is a gym nearby where they're pretty chill with me filming. So I'm going to be doing the majority of my filming there, which is going to be sweet. But let's go get to the gym and fucking do these jumping lunges and grow the damn leg, bro. Okay, this would be set 5, and kind of kicking my ass. So last workout I got 15 reps. First set I did with the 50s for 20. First and second. Third and fourth sets I did 15 reps with the 55s, but it was a real grinder. So these last two are going to be very tough. And I try to either add more reps onto the previous total I got from the last workout, or make the form tighter. So I find if every workout you want to add more reps, sometimes your form will start to slip. But if instead you say, I'm going to go for the same amount of reps, so I'm going to try and tighten up my form. So in the case of the lunges, I'm trying to temper the knee tap with the back knee. So I don't want to be bouncing that knee off the back. And then I'm trying to jump higher, or as high as I can. Because I always want to go into the workout to try to make it harder in some way. And if I'm not going to add reps, I'm going to do it by trying to make the form more difficult or more dialed in. I find a balance of those. And in the following workout, I'd probably try to go for 16s. But that's enough fucking yip yammering. Let's go for 15 good reps. Let's go. Ooh. Ooh. The fucking burn always comes in after. Goes away in a few seconds. But fucking pain is pleasure anyway, so we like it. Sixth and final set. And another thing you want to watch out for in these lungersons is that the front leg, your foot, your knee, and your hip all stay in a straight line. So I find that instead of you start with your legs together and then you step forward, your knee kind of ends up inside of your hip. So instead, it's good to have like a little space. And then if I'm straight forward from there, my foot, my knee, and my hip are all in a straight line. That way it's easier on your knees. And you're going to do a better job of activating your glutes too. So go for a good 15. That's sixth and final set. Let's go. Hey. So a little space between my feet there. Let's go. Oh, fuck tits. Holy shit. Oh, that's the burn we want. That's a fucking cock inverting set. Oh, for some reason when I go super fucking hard, it feels like my cock is inverting inside my body. It's like all the blood is in my legs. I don't know. There you go. Okay. I don't know how far I need to go to be in the shot, but here we go. All right, that's the leg pump. Let's check out how they're looking. And generally, I don't really have much definition in my legs. I mean, especially when they're all pumped up and full of blood. There's very little separation in the muscles. I mean, I'm not the leanest right now, but lean enough that I think it's just a genetic thing. But yeah, that was the workout. It was pretty good.